This video is an unplanned follow-on to the last one I made, and what I want to do is talk about the Kolbrin Bible a little bit. I'm not going to cover the Kolbrin, but I want to talk about it as a suitable document for study. I hadn't looked at it in a long time, and Nikki of Earth got me to look at it and start analyzing, and I did a little bit. And I can see something in here that I want to talk about. And the history of the book, all of that, there's some things in here that I just want to say. I believe that the book is, number one, fake. Number two, I believe the book is nevertheless viable. That the information in here is viable, but the person is trying to pass it off as something that was from long ago. The information is still viable. It fits on the templates from antiquity. However, let's look at this and see why it makes sense or doesn't make sense. My name is Dan Paulson, and welcome to the channel. If anyone is spiritual seeking in the same way that I am, it's really looking at all the material possible and analyzing it and determining what those similarities are until we know what they are, and then finding out that they're actually built on templates, and when they don't sound similar, they still match on the template. They just sound a lot different. They're using different analogous verbiage that makes them sound quite a bit different. One thing that was very helpful to me at one point in time was this. Not the Nag Hammadi itself, but the Gospel of Thomas was something that I began to read, and I went through there and I realized, oh, there's Jesus verses in here that sound like they're from the Sermon on the Mount or the Sermon on the Plain, something he would say. Then there's other things that don't fit. You know, you read Jesus for a lifetime and you go, there's things in here that I never heard before. What is that? And you begin to look at things, and I realize at some point, okay, this the Pharisees are like the dog in the manger. That is an Aesop fable from 500 years previous to that. The 5 trees in paradise are going to be the 5 beams in Marduk's head, the 5 rivers in Genesis that start off in the second creation story. You begin to see similarities in here that you I begin to realize this was like a Rosetta Stone for me. I begin to realize they're grabbing pieces from elsewhere, and that allowed me to see how verses from another place fits in with this work right here, if that makes any sense. This helped me see a lot of things by only having, I found 3 sources from the Gospel of Thomas, and there's probably more. And right off the bat in the Kolbrin Bible, as I start going through, I recognize things off the bat that's like, well, that sounds like Lao Tzu from Taoism. That sounds like Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. Oh, that sounds like Moses in, Genesis. And you soon you realize, yeah, that's what this is. This is a collection of things from all over the place put together with, okay, let's get into it and analyze it and see that. I'm going to make some comparisons with verses, but first, before I do that, let's read on what we know of the history of the Kolbrin Bible. Now, I'm going to go to a YouTube channel here, giving voice to the wisdom of the ages, and just read a couple of comments, because this is what you see. Let's see. Here's one. Why are you changing the names of Adam and Eve and the rest of them? This tells of the Younger Dryas event. From a scientific perspective, this sounds more true than the Big Bang. This sounds like an alien entity creating this or a higher being in a computer simulation. That's scientific? Okay, here's another one. Here we go. Ugh, okay. So by far is one of the worst religions I've come across so far. Lots of laugh. Nothing against anyone who believes it. It just sounds like everyone gets screwed over continuing from generation to generation. Like this God has to be just as much of he's got a lot of swear words in there I don't want to read on the channel. Anyway, yeah, so you have people that are looking at this going, it's baloney, it's true, it's, oh, thank you, it's wonderful, oh, finally, something that makes sense. What the hell is it? That's how all religious material works, honestly. They're all built on the same templates. What did he say? People getting screwed every generation? This is cycles, number 1, but number 2, we're seeing repetition of the monomyth. It is the outer shell that people find appealing or not. It is the carrier. It is the ark itself. Those are all metaphoric, analogous. It's all mental. Okay, and we see, yeah, somebody said, why do you change the names of Adam and Eve? You know what? You read this stuff and you go, I recognize that. I recognize that. Are you copying something? That's the template. That's the template. Watch for it. They are copying, absolutely, because of the template. The template is framed on a human life, how we come about, how we get hurt, how we heal ourselves. They're all the same. This is important to humanity for self-healing, for finding your path to God, inward, whatever that means. All right, let's go. I'm going to pull up something on the history of it and read through and just talk about a couple of things. And I'm not going to read through it straight. I'm going to read through little bits of it and then stop and talk about each one a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started on where did the Kolbrin Bible come from. I'm going to pull this up from the Koldian Trust, Kolbrin manuscripts, kolbrin.com. Okay, so as we get into this and read it, what I'm going to suggest right off the bat, and I'm going to hit it the way I do. It's going to sound to me as I start reading it like just absolute crap. There's no commitment to it. It's hearsay. It's conjecture. There's no commitments. It's as solid as Jell-O when you hear this. Okay, here we have it. It has been rumored that Nikola Tesla acquired some knowledge from this book, according to James M. McCaney, M5. In the past, only a very select few some might say an elite group, have had access to this book. Now the current caretakers of this ancient knowledge believe these are the days of decision when humankind stands at the crossroad and are making the book available, subject to explicit conditions. How nice. All right. They're giving us magical stuff that's been hidden and held away. Nikola Tesla is rumored to have. Yeah, what the hell is that? You could say anything. Now, I will say about Nikola Tesla that he was thought by many people to be an occultist, but he wasn't. What he knew was, I don't think he knew this template in the material, but he knew what to do. He understood how life worked on its own. What did he say? To understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. What the hell is this? That's it. That's what the template, that's what the human life emerges from and how life works. He was not an occultist. He knew how things worked. That's what we're looking for, the template. The occultists are the ones that put on all the weird stuff and put, crystal balls and do all kinds of weird things and think that they've got some kind of magical powers. Or they're interacting with some kind of spirit entities or something out there. Yeah, he was not an occultist. So to say that is what? That right there, though, is going to be enough for a lot of people to go, oh, if Nikola Tesla was about this, then it's got to be good. They just take something like that and you have to discriminate when you're looking for the truth. You can't just listen to people say stuff and go, oh, okay, that's true. You have to go, why? Really? Is that possible that it might not be? I mean, there's reasons to question some things, but not other things. If it's stuff like this and it's very critical spiritual stuff, yeah, I want to know. I want to interact with it. The Kolbrin.com is currently the largest online source of information regarding the Kolbrin and Kaledi manuscripts. It is not the official website of the Koldian Trust, but we have worked in close communication with the Koldian Trust in an effort to provide the partial electronic rendition of their original translation, also notably the first Kolbrin ever published and made available to the general public in modern history. The Kolbrin is printed in New Zealand by the Koldian Trust, and they remain responsible for it. The Koldian Trust believe that they are the inheritors of the ancient wisdom of the Koldies of Britain, who were part of the British or Celtic Christian community prior to its Romanization under Augustine, after which it suffered severely through persecution and suppression. However, it survived to a greater or lesser degree until the great persecution of the late Middle Ages, when the flame was further extinguished, leaving only a few sparks surviving to kindle the present revival. The Koldian Celestial Age Trust do not refer to the Kolbrin as a Bible and do not agree that it's a version of the Old Testament on the grounds that it's clearly not the history of the Jewish people. Okay, you know what? They just said a bunch of stuff there. The Kolbrin is printed in New Zealand. That might be true. The Koldian Trust believe that they are. Okay, so what? A lot of people believe all kinds of stuff. That doesn't mean they are anything. It's just the verbiage. They might believe that, but so what? That doesn't grant anybody authority unless you say, ooh, I'm going to give them authority because they said that. They are the inheritors of its ancient wisdom, of the Koldies of Britain. And there's probably bits and pieces in here, but you know what? They're not really talking about the Kolbrin Bible. From combined research, the origins of the Kolbrin can be traced back to a large collection of manuscripts. Here we go. Salvaged from Glastonbury Abbey during an arson attack that was intended to destroy them. It was the time of history when there was a great suppression of monasteries. As fate would have it, the once considered heretical works were transcribed on bronze tablets by the religious druids of the time. Since they were thought to be destroyed during the fire, they were preserved in secrecy. Since then, much of the original text was lost or destroyed due to the passage of time. Actually, let me talk about that last one for a minute. The Kolbrin can be traced back. It was a time of history with great suppression. That could be true. As fate would have it, the once considered heretical works were transcribed. Isn't that convenient? Yeah, all that, I mean, it could be true, but it's like they're creating a flow here that justifying the existence of this. Since then, much of the original text was lost or destroyed due to the passage of time, their environment, and human error. Each caretaker, though, has gone to painstaking efforts to preserve what was left and to fill in the gaps with the current knowledge in order to preserve their original meaning. Man, that sounds not right at all. Let's talk about that for a second. Something's wrong with that idea. Okay, and I'm not an expert in this area, so I don't want to try to pass myself off as one. What I want to do, though, is say that from experience, we'll find this. If you go look at material from antiquity, what you're going to find is something like this. Here's the Nag Hammadi library in English. This is part of the Dialogue of the Savior. It was in very bad shape when it was found. The scrolls were not, there were holes in them. They were rotting away. This is what they were able to recover. What do? They leave it blank. Nobody fills it in. Of course, that's just, you don't fill it in. Now, in the case of the Kolbrin Bible, that's not what they were describing. They were saying updating it as you go along. But again, you're changing what the original intent was. Typically, what you will find is something like this from the Enuma Elish. Here we have an example of, you can see where the font is not darkened, is not highlight, or is not bold, is what was recovered on the tablet. And the bold is what the author added in, letting you know, hey, I'm going to put this in here, but I'm speculating these things based on my own experience. You're going to handle it that way. You're not going to complete the Kolbrin Bible with adding that stuff in without identifying some way that you're adding that in. That would be incredibly unscholarly, very unscholarly. It would not be accurate. You're updating as you go. I would want to hear Jesus. I would not want to hear a Christian today tell me what Jesus says. No, I want to go to the source. And, by that I mean, there's nothing wrong with you writing your own interpretation, your own volumes of what there is. But you don't change what the original volume or add to it to make yours. You create yours as a separate thing. I don't like that. That doesn't sound right at all. All right, before moving on, let's review that again. Since then, much of the original text was lost or destroyed. Much of the original text was lost or destroyed due to the passage of time, their environment, and human error. Human error sounds weird. Each caretaker, though, so there's human error with caretakers, has gone to painstaking efforts to preserve what was left and to fill in the gaps with the correct knowledge in order to preserve the original meaning. During the early 14th century, John Coldy, the leader of a small community in Scotland, owned the Kolbrin and took steps to ensure its survival beyond his care. We don't know that. Those are just things people are saying, someone is saying. The Kolbrin eventually became known as the Bronze Book of Britain, and the contents of additional salvaged manuscripts known as the Kol Book were later incorporated into it to form the modern version. So they're telling us it's the original has been added to, and it's a compilation from other sources. Right here they're telling us that. Its name is possibly derived from the... That's not too important to me. There's a second volume to the Kolbrin, the Gospel of the Cality, which deals specifically with the life and times of Jesus Christ. It was thought because it had obvious ancient roots in Chaldean, but it's not, blah, blah. Yeah, they're just going on. It's like a conversation here that is like an extrovert just blabbering away, saying nothing. In the early parts of the 20th century, the responsibility of the Kolbrin Five's preservation rested with a small religious group in England that never gained much power due to their very restrictive membership requirements. Again, there's nothing we can do with that. That's just, okay, maybe, maybe not. Does it matter? Who cares? That's irrelevant. In the years leading up to the First World War, only 2 copies of the Kolbrin existed in book form. So as recently as the 1900s, only 2 copies of the Kolbrin existed in book form, written in biblical English. And why would it be English at all? That's what there is left. That's the preservation. I don't get that. How did that transition happen? Only part of the original survived to the Second World War, when the books were thought to be worthless junk and then thrown out by their owners, only to be saved by fate and then discarded again as works of the devil and salvaged by destiny before any irreparable damage was done. Yeah, this sounds like a fairy story. Until 1995, the Kolbrin was in the care of the Hope Trust, of which little is known. Well, there is currently a Hope Trust registered in New Zealand, but they have nothing to do with the Kolbrin, nor do they have anything to do with it. Extrovert. Nice pants. What kind of tires are on your car? The current custodian is the Kolbrin Trust, which was formed in 1980. The Kolbrin Trust inherited the Kolbrin and other books when the Hope Trust was deregistered around 1995 in accordance with its constitution. You know what? This starts off with the Kolbrin was in care of the Hope Trust, of which little is known. And now they're telling us in other books when the Hope Trust was deregistered around 1995 in accordance with its constitution. Well, I guess that's maybe, you know something about him anyway. Around 1992, an elderly man from the Hope Trust, who is now deceased, put together the current draft from the originals. His character, reputation, and relatives are still living. He was an extremely private man while alive, and the trust are respecting his wishes with regard to continued privacy. I'm not laughing about the story or the man or the plight or anything like that. The delivery here is like trying to convince you, hey, you know what? We know somebody who had... They were good people that knew good things, and they say good stuff about him, and you know what? His relatives are still living. Okay, well, I'll trust him then. You know what? It's not helping the case of the Kolbrin Bible's origins. Not to me. It doesn't sound like anything. The Kolbrin Trust members did not get to see the original manuscripts on, oh, how convenient. Yeah. You know what? That sounds like Mormonism, huh? Nobody gets to see what Joseph Smith found. No one gets to see the original manuscript on which the most recent version of the Kolbrin was derived, nor do they understand how they came into the elderly man's possession or where he sent the originals upon completion. So actually, everything before this point is a hearsay. They believe, based on speculation, that he may have been a member of a Hermetic order, possibly based in England, so the original manuscripts may have gone back there, despite the continued ambiguity of the Kolbrin's origins. Yeah, I'd say so. How about the ambiguity of this document? A Kolbrin Trust representative that knew the man for approximately 20 years held him in high regard and found him to be a man of extremely high integrity. Well, damn, that's how they're selling the value of this book, the veracity of its truth, its history, right there. Held him in high regard and found him to be a man of extremely high integrity. It's pretty easy to say. You know, step back from this and think about it for a second. This is like that ancient alien stuff. Is it possible, coulda, shoulda, woulda, maybe, if this possible, and if that, then this, and if, could it be possible that, is there a, yeah, there's, what, whew. And people jump all over that. That's what I'm hearing. And then in the end, it's like, how do you believe it? Well, because this person was a good man. Still got relatives. We are covering ourselves legally and morally and have done everything within reason to prevent large portions of the Kolbrin text from being copied unlawfully. We have an obligation to the trust. We wish to honor those values. Please note that only a portion of this amazing collection is viewable online. Let me grab my foil hat. There are rumors that the Vatican has a copy and that there were some copies in India. But both of these are most likely falsehoods, especially the last one, as it comes from a group for which we know personally from the Kolbrin Trust started publishing the book without permission. I better double up that foil. Nikola Tesla may have had access to the Kolbrin through his father, Mulatin Tesla, as suggested. And it could be suggested possibly from so-and-so said so-and-so, which says so-and-so. So you know what? There you go. How does that sound to you? It sounds phony as hell to me. Okay. That doesn't matter. Let's look at some verses. This is where no one can argue. Now, there's a bit of a setup here because what we're looking for is a template. So I'm going to describe something that is going to be happening in the beginning of each one of these texts that we're going to be looking at in this first example. The reason that is because this is right before creation. But creation is before birth of the human, before we are born, or before we are conscious maybe. Maybe we're born, but we're not yet. We're in that phase of infancy where we don't even have memories. We don't have enough brain connections to see, that point in time. At any rate, we haven't started to have conscious life experiences that we can look back on and remember, or that have impacted us in some way. That's an early part of the template. So if we take a look right here, there is in the book of creation, this is from the Kolbrin Bible, right up front, the very first page. And down here in verse number 7, here is what we have. Earth was not yet in existence. There were no winds with the sky above them. High mountains were not raised, nor was the great river in its place. All was formless, without movement, calm, silent, void, and dark. No name had been named, and no destinies foreshadowed. Now, to interpret this properly, it's before we're born. Earth is going to be us. Think of it this way. Earth and creation is your birth, your capacity to experience Earth, your connection with life. That is Earth. And whatever unfolds in this story are going to be component parts of typical life experiences. As the story unfolds and we're living on Earth and there are problems on Earth, that represents our life and our psyche. And that is how the stories are made on a template of the human life. So Earth was not yet in existence. Our awareness, our capacity to understand was not there. No winds in the sky above them, high mountains, rivers. 3. There's a trilogy right there going on. We have a higher self, a conscious, and a subconscious. They were not in place yet. All was formless, without movement, calm, silent, void, and dark. No name had been named, and no destinies foreshadowed. That's the one we're going to look at right there. No name had been named, and no destinies foreshadowed. Now, we know that this is derived from the Babylonian works, but there is something in the Enuma Elish right here. And look at where it is. Tablet 1, one of the very first lines that we have going on in here. And let's just read through it. At a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, so we're not in existence yet, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath. Our physical is not coming into existence yet. It was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, that's the cosmos, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. At a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence, there were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. So to interpret these ones here, the no names to be spoken, or right above that, at a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence. Divine beings are analogous terms being used to help who and what we are, our qualities, our characteristics, our love, our anger, our hate, our emotional qualities. Those have not yet come into existence. We don't exist yet. I should mention the term God is analogous. It does not mean a real God. The reason they're called gods in this work, that's very early work. But if you think back on your early life when we have our emotional outburst, who's in charge? That thing becomes a god at that moment and takes over us. It'll be destroyed later as we go on, but at this point, those aren't happening. But look at that very next line. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. Let's grab that. There are no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. That comes from the Babylonian work, the Enum Elish. And then we add into that, no name had been named and no destinies foreshadowed, from the Kolbrin Bible. So if we take a look at those, we see that they sound very similar, but let's talk through them and see how they are actually teaching us the same thing. There were no names to be spoken from the Enum Elish. Names means you are conscious and you decide something. I've learned something. I have had an experience. Now that is a part of who I am. That is not happening yet. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. Once we do name something, that becomes a part of us, and it begins to be a part of our life that is going to continue to emerge. Now, that might not be a big deal. It might be something happy and joyful that you think about from time to time. Typically, what we're looking for here in this, though, are problem areas, problematic issues. We have a destination. We're looking for happiness, so we're looking for the things that are preventing us from getting there. In this case, no fates pronounced means that the things that we have inside of us that have hurt us, or perceptions, or somehow something, our angers that are continuing to act out, no fates pronounced. That has not happened yet. No names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. We have not experienced anything, and as a result, we're not yet going to have a continuation of the experience of that, a continuation in life of that. If we jump to the Kolbrin, it says no name had been named. We have not yet decided upon anything, and no destinies foreshadowed. How easy is that? Bam, right there. We see a parallel with just a slight verbiage difference. Now, the Kolbrin is said to be as old, but these are parallels I think we would expect to see if it was something that was derived from there. But I think that I don't think that the source is authentic. I think that there's just too many holes in that, and the whole idea of trying to tell you and convince us that it's real is more smoke and mirrors than anything, going all over the place and painting this wonderful pictures, and even coming down to telling you the guy's relatives are alive, he's a good guy, but they want it kept in private. Yeah, here's a good story. You can't touch it. You can't verify it. You can't confirm it. We're just supposed to take it for its real. Meanwhile, hey, wait a minute. Let's take a closer look here. What else do we have? This is the Tao Te Ching Lao Tzu from China. You can see we're on page 1 right here. It's a very short script compared to what we saw with the Kolbrin Bible. What I want to zoom in right here is the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. I'll tell you, this one's moving on quickly, but watch. I'm going to grab these 2 lines right here. I'll pull up our previous work. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. No name had been named and no destinies foreshadowed. Let's add our Chinese work. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. We have to play them out conceptually, and these will emerge as the same thing. Naming is the origin of all particular things in this case. Up above we had there were no names to be spoken. So far that was not happening yet. No name had been named from the Kolbrin. We hadn't named yet. Naming is the origin of all particular things. That's letting us know that once we do start naming things, that is the origin of that particular thing for our experience in the world. It's not the origin of that thing in the universe. It's the origin of our experience with it. Naming is what we have done to it. Free from that, we realize the mystery. And no destinies foreshadowed and no fates pronounced up above. Free from that, you realize the mystery. We're not going to have those destinies hitting us. Do you see that? This is magic once you crack it open. I've got to talk about another structural element. There is the basic template. You emerge from the background. Everything that is not classified in your mind is pure. Once you begin having life experiences, you become a product of those life experiences. This is what is going to emerge. However, not many people are going to do it. If you have a monomyth, you can have a calling. And a calling can be as simple as Jedediah walked with God. There you go. That means there's an individual that lives their life connected to their higher self, or having the capacity to connect with their higher being, the source, who and what we are. We can get there where we're not emotionally attached to things. That's a calling right there. You can have a calling where a war is going on in space and lasers are flying off and a princess is trying to get a message out to get help because they're going to be overrun, and the rebels need to get help, and they need this master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And she sends a message in these droids, and they have all of this big event, and they finally get down to Luke, who sees the message, and he knows he has to go do it. How long did that take? It's still step one. You can take each step and just make it really huge. This is not very big. This is actually, step one goes on and on and on, and then it goes finally to step two, where these are kind of more quickly along the way. This one is a teaching element that is more concise. This would be very time-consuming. This would be a lifelong sort of a thing to have fun and study with. But you're not going to move along quickly. I'm going through this at some point. I've got my mindset, kind of working through Genesis, where things are progressing at a certain pace. I get into this and I'm not quite getting it. It's like, what's going on? I finally realize, from a story perspective, it continues on. And I think it would, in the hands of somebody that's interested in it, it would be something that would occupy you, and it contains the wonderful lessons in there. I don't want to go too far off, but if we went to Genesis right in the beginning, what happens? There's a point where man has to name the cattle and the birds of the air and the creatures on the ground. The air, the ground. This is us naming things right there. It's carrying the story, but in a different way, in a completely different style. But it still plays on the template. All right, before going back to the Kolbrin and showing what is in there, I want to watch this. These things excite me. Take a look at this from the Buddha, right in the Dhammapada, the very first verse. Look what it says. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. I'm going to grab this line. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. No name had been named and no destinies foreshadowed. Naming is the origin of all particular things. These are all mental processes of our experiences, free of them. Free of them. We're not tied to them. Buddha starts right off. It's mental, and you've named something. If you speak or act with an evil thought, you've named something. Pain follows him as the wheel follows the ox that draws the carriage. We are now experiencing a destiny, a fate. Somebody in the background is so masterful. They know how to push, pull, manipulate the words. It's a flow that is just mind-boggling, but they did it for thousands of years. We got to unwrap it. I was not prepared on this video, and you know what? I jumped into big teaching mode there instead of my comparison mode of the Kolbrin, so I'm getting right back to that right now. But I think people still like this stuff because it is so important to see that and to do that. That's demonstrating the conceptual similarities in the starting of the pattern, the template, at creation, at the beginning of human life. Okay, back to the Kolbrin. This time I'm going to back up to verse 4. The name which is uttered cannot be that of this great being who, remaining nameless, is the beginning and the end, beyond time, beyond the reach of mortals, and we, in our simplicity, call it God. Back to the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu and China. The second line there of the very first page here. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The name which is uttered cannot be that of this great being, who, remaining nameless. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The name which is uttered, the name which is named, is not the eternal name. The name which is named is not that of this great being, who, remaining nameless. It is... All right, do you see what's going on? The name that can be named is not the eternal name. What this is saying is that somewhere out there is the void, and in this void, our life, we can create anything from that. Whatever we become, however our perceptions, our experiences, our beliefs, all of that, as we grow through life, that is how we begin to experience life. That in the beginning, when it's not named, it is eternal. It is anything. It has the potential, and I mean for us in our life. This is about us again, so it's not supernatural. We have to keep it realistic. Whatever it is out there, there's an energy that we emerge from, we return to. We're always connected to. For a time, we are conscious and we are physical and we are beings emergent from that. But that is, from what back there is that what can't be named. All right, I'm going to operate on this thing here a little bit. The name, which as you saw, I changed that capital named up there. That was from uttered. Uttered, named, same thing. I wanted it to look familiar with what it is below. Uttered is named. It is spoken. It is classifying. It is having an experience and deciding this is how I am going to hate, hurt, shame, love, whatever. That is what is there. The name that is named cannot be of this great being. I'm going to stop it right there and call that a complete sentence. Watch. Now, read that from the top. The name which is named cannot be that of this great being. Down below, the name that can be named is not the eternal name. You know, it looks like somebody grabbed that, put the who on there, read it, changed it up a little bit, and added more to it. Remaining nameless is the beginning and the end. Yeah, okay, we know that it is. Lao Tzu didn't say it because it doesn't matter. It is everything. It is all. Beyond time. Yep. Beyond the reach of mortals. Mortals is people who are not turned inward. They're not the chosen ones. And in our simplicity, call it God. And Lao Tzu just straight up leaves out all the fluff. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. You see that? I'm going to do a creation story now, starting with Adam and Eve and sin. But as we move along, what I'm going to ask you to do as we read it is to try to imagine that the entire story is playing out in your psyche, that you are the main component part, that Adam is going to be your consciousness, that Eve is going to be who and what you have become. We call it subconscious, but what it really is when we're born, we don't have this. It's our bundle of life experiences and knowledge and everything. All that stuff is what we live through. That is our Eve. But everything that we have experienced in life resides there. So let's go ahead and read. And these are all metaphoric stories on the template in a storytelling culture. Let's shift it into something that is interactive or something that we can understand. What it's going to be representing is our beginnings of life as we begin to learn about life and we're beginning to get hurt. It doesn't mean that we're sinning. These are analogous terms. What it means is that we are beginning to name things. We're beginning to qualify. We're beginning to put stuff away that are experiences. All right, let's go ahead and read on then. First sin. Now the serpent was craftier than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. The serpent represents the physical world and our experiences in that world. He said to the woman, "Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and then it was a delight to the eyes. So we are seeing life experience as good for food. We are learning from it. We are doing whatever it is we're doing in life. Think back on your life. That is what we're consuming and becoming. And it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. This is how we learn and experience life. This is us growing and developing, emerging from the background of not being something. She took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. All right. It's important to say before we move along that a lot of times the analogs sound like, oh, I should do that or I shouldn't do that. And that in the story, it might sound that way, but when you shift it to the template, it might not be. Ultimately, when you think about it, this is a tree that almost everyone is going to partake of. It's life, it's experiences, it's temptations, it's not knowing. It is wiring to the external world and becoming a product of all of the things that we see out there and being caught up and wrapped up in it. That is what sin is. So we tend to say, "Oh, I can't attach to that." As an analog, it doesn't mean sin anymore. It means something different. When I am naked in the physical world, that means I don't have any clothes on. When I'm naked in the spiritual world, it means I don't have anything to hide. They're different. The analogs have to shift. So we got to be careful with and everything is an analog. All right, we'll get back to the Kolbrin now, and this is going to be all the way to chapter 5 in creation, verse 32. So in Genesis, where we have first sin right in, what is that, the 3rd chapter? We're all the way into chapter 5 here before we have a similar thing happening. So again, the verbosity, somebody packed this dense with a lot of other flowery verbiage. I'm sure it's tucked with nuggets. You could probably work at it for a long time. Maeva took what had been given to her, and finding datum, this is the Maeva is the female, datum is, look at datum right there. That looks like Adam, doesn't it? Take the D off. And Maeva, Eva, they're not very far off there, are they? Laid low in his bed, gave him a draught from her vessel, though she had to use womanly wiles to get him to drink it. She drank the remainder, and they both slept. But when they awoke in the morning, both were suffering pains, and this was something they had not known before. Okay, this is different. This is how you're getting punished right here. Instead of God punishing you for sinning, what's happening here is they partook of something, then a period of time goes by. You sleep, you wake up, now they don't feel good. And he's like, the only way we can feel this way if you've done something that can't be undone. What do we have? You've now experienced something in life. You're stuck. You have guilt. You have something right there. You don't feel good because something happened. There is your punishment right there. What have you done? For what has happened to us cannot be unless the things which are forbidden have been done. The woman replied, Lord, I was tempted and I fell. I have done that which is forbidden and unforgivable. Datum said, I am bound by duty to do certain things. But first, let us go into the Gisar to the place called I don't even know how to pronounce that, Beth Kelchris, where I will seek enlightenment. So they went there together and stood before the shrine beneath the tree of wisdom. There they were filled with an inflowing vision, seeing themselves as they were and as they should have been, and they were ashamed. Okay, can we understand what's happening here? There's more than we think. Datum said, I am bound by duty to do certain things, but first let us go into the Gisar to the place called, Beth Kelchris, where I will seek enlightenment. These are inner places. This is going to be the mind. You are seeking some place, some console in yourself. I'm going to the place up here where I seek enlightenment. I want to think about what's happened and try to feel better about it. So we both go there together and stood before the shrine beneath the tree of wisdom. How do we deal with this? Can we get past it? What do they have? They were filled with an inflowing vision, seeing themselves as they were and as they should have been. So now we want one thing, we don't have it. And they were ashamed. What was Adam and Eve? Ashamed, naked. They had to cover their nakedness. For the contamination of the woman was revealed. The woman is our inner being, and that is where the sin is. And the man is stuck holding it, but the man is the one that had the life experience and put it away to begin with. The consciousness went, ow, that hurt. I don't like that. I hate you. I'm ashamed of that. Those people suck. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm a worthless piece of crap. All of those are creations. All of those are in our Eve. She's evil. I want to take a closer look at a line here. He, because he had not followed the proper path of a man, and she, because of her falsity. This is not in the Bible. In the Bible, it's she messed up, she made the mistake, he pays the price as a result. That is still holding the lesson. However, the analogous verbiage, when it's not interpreted, becomes, the teaching from hell. He, because he had not followed the proper path in this case of a man, that means the consciousness. As you're going on in life, you're making decisions that are the wrong choice. I made the wrong choice, and now I have an issue because of it. And she, because of her falsity, she is no longer pure. She is now becoming something that we have to hide something in there. Right there. Yeah, that's the conscious and the subconscious working together to create that issue. There in the reflecting mist, the contamination of the woman was revealed. Yeah, it comes out in life. And the man's heart shriveled within him like a flower licked by a flame. That's because we become chicken chats. We're afraid of it. We don't like it. It is so hard to go after the amount of energy it takes to say, you know what, it's my shame and my anger and my hatred, my belief system that I have to change. My shame. What did I do? What's been done to me? How do you be okay with that? That is why it suddenly falls off of people's radar. That's exactly what you have to do. What hurts you? That has to be healed. Okay. Here's what I think. After looking at it, really, the history of it is so dubious. It sounds like it sounds like a conspiracy theory or an ancient alien show. It does. Could it, should it, maybe, perhaps is, and so is trusted and they want privacy, but it's got relatives. It's like, what? Yeah, that's so goofy. It doesn't sound right to begin with. Things from antiquity that survived that were valuable seem to have made it. Things that don't make it look like they came downstream. And I think that's what this is. Somebody could look at it and say, well, Buddhism came along after this. If it's truly as old as they claim, then Buddhism could have taken from that. Lao Tzu could have taken from that. They're 1,000 years perhaps after that. Maybe 1,500 or 2,000, I'm not sure. Jesus could have gotten from that. Moses could have gotten from, everybody could have taken from this. I suppose that's true. But this is such modern verbiage, and it is so long and drawn out, so flowery. I'm more inclined to think that this is more recent. I mean, hundreds of years perhaps. I don't know. I wouldn't even speculate on that. But the verbiage and what is known in there, as far as like man's early beginnings, evolving as apes and things like that, whoever wrote it, that it was at a time when that was known in science, that we are evolving. So it's after, yeah, all right. And it's more easy to look at this and say, whoever wrote this grabbed a little bit of here, grabbed a little bit there, grabbed a piece from this, reworded that over there. That's what it looks more like to me. I think that's what it is. The components it's holding in there are just no new analogous ways of holding the teaching. It is so thick and so big and so colorful, though, I think I don't want to really work on it because I have my hands full of other things. This would be a big project, honestly, to go through. I just gave it a cursory look, honestly. I barely looked at it, but it's so blatantly, it's like, nah, I don't think so. What? No. If you think Nibiru's coming back, take it easy. We're okay. We're okay. We got bigger problems than Nibiru on this planet. We don't have to look to outer space. That's why we have to look to inner space, because regular space is not okay. All right, well, those are my thoughts on it. I just wanted to say that it was fun to get into. It was interesting. It was a sidetrack, kind of well, I don't know. I get bleary-eyed with the material sometimes, and then I leave it alone for a while, and I come back and it pops up more. You know, there's a point where you're reading it and you're interpreting it as you go. You know, if I read something like "Blessed are the poor in spirit," when I read that, what my eyes see, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." But in the process of that going into my storage, what I read is, "Blessed are those empty of convictions. For theirs is the kingdom of God. For yours is the good flow of life." You're free of that stuff. I make those. I mean, at some point, you're just doing that as you go. Blessed are those who mourn. You turn inward. You mourn the things that you're carrying inside. Mourning is it's an analog too. It doesn't mean just what hurts you that's sad. It means mourning everything that is keeping you from making it to the kingdom of heaven within. Resolving the conflict. You know, that stuff you're like, I will never tell anybody this stuff. Get away from me. Yeah, that's it right there. That's the wall. And when people go, yeah, you, this, that, you, you gay people, or you something here or there, what they're letting you know of is what their wall is. That's their shame. They got something back there. Either an experience or just a mental committed conviction from being wired that way in an environment where, anyway, that's how we get it. It's all mental. They are mental products too. We are mental products. We have to get out of the quality of mental product that's destructive to us. All right. Hope it was fun. Hope it was interesting and informative. It was for me. I always learn a lot when I do this. So love one another, and I'll see you in the next video.